I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but I finally got the chance to watch Makoto Shinkai's Kimi no Nawa, or Your Name, and it quickly became something that I couldn't stop thinking about. The soundtrack has been playing all week, I've shown it to and watched it with several other people, and some of the amazing illustrations have even made it onto my desktop background. But while the music is phenomenal, and the art is breathtaking, and the story will pull on your heartstrings, these aren't the things that I'm going to be talking about today. Instead, I want to talk about a core theme that often goes ignored, how it's implemented in the writing and the characters, and more importantly, how it helps the audience grow as people when they watch this. So, today, we will be talking about the inspiration and psychology behind Your Name. Your Name focuses on two characters, being Taki, a boy from Tokyo, and Mitsuha, a girl from a small town called Itomori out in the boonies. These two swap bodies and deal with the ramifications of having other people literally walking a mile in their shoes. It's cute, it's fun, and it's a great way to learn about and become attached to these characters. By showing Taki acting out of the norm in Mitsuha's body, you learn about both of them, things that they would and wouldn't do. Taki is this slightly aggressive guy who acts on impulse, and not really thinking about his situation, will do things like flipping desks, accidentally giving guys a peek up his skirt, stuff like that. But at the same time, we also see him carrying Mitsuha's grandma so she doesn't have to climb up the mountain, showing his softer side as well. Meanwhile, Mitsuha is blown away by the big city and its cafes. She gets lost and she's easily overwhelmed, but at the same time, she's miles better at relationships and will go out of her way to help others. We learn so much about these characters just by them swapping bodies, and by showing off all of these rapid-fire fun or quirky traits, you just end up liking them very quickly. Of course, that all leads us to the second act of the movie, where this comet that Mitsuha had been waiting for this entire time finally arrives. Something the whole world is watching and gushing about how beautiful this moment is, only for the comet to begin to split apart, and for a massive fragment to land directly on Itomori, something which kills 500 people, including Mitsuha, in an absolutely haunting moment. And here's where we need to step away from Your Name for a moment and instead look to the real world. On March 11th, 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake happened just off the coast of Japan. This was not only the most powerful earthquake that Japan had ever faced, but it was also the fourth strongest that the world had ever seen in recorded history. It went on for about 6 minutes, and it triggered a tsunami that was sent towards the Tohoku region, with waves reaching over 40 meters high, traveling at 700 kilometers per hour, and reaching about 10 kilometers into the land, with many residents having as little as 8 to 10 minutes to evacuate in some areas. Not that there were that many places to evacuate to, as over 100 evacuation sites were entirely wiped away. 19,747 deaths, 6,242 injured, 2,556 missing as of 2021, and just over 228,000 people still displaced from their homes. But things weren't done. The tsunami also caused a meltdown of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor, eventually causing it to explode and leaving a region that is still more or less uninhabitable even over a decade later. And all of these horrors on this day have come to be known as 3/11, or the Tohoku triple disaster. If there was one word that I'd use to describe all of this, it would be unimaginable. And I mean that in a lot of ways. You can hear the term 9.0 earthquake, but we don't really know what that feels like. Most of us haven't even felt an earthquake before, and having felt a few dozen small ones last year for the first time in my life, I can definitely say that it was nothing like I thought it would be.
Oh shit, this is a big one. Oh shit. Oh fuck. Okay, this is big. Has anyone seen the magnitude of that thing? That thing was fucking huge. Oh my god, it wasn't even that bad. I think it's 4. That was a 4.6 in Tokyo.
We can hear a 40-meter tall wave traveling at 700 kilometers per hour, but I know I couldn't imagine what that would look like. It's a 13-story tall building reaching as far across as your eye can see, traveling at the speed an airplane does towards you. I can sympathize with the idea of how terrifying that would be, but I can't even begin to empathize or understand with what that really means. The situation itself is just beyond understanding, but even more difficult to realize is the loss of human life. I grew up in a town of about 20,000 people, which is about the same number of only the people who died on that day. I can't possibly begin to understand what it would be like to have everyone I've ever met just gone, along with most of the people that they've met and the people that they've met as well. I can't rationalize what 11 times that amount of people being injured would mean. However, I did get to meet people who did. I spent 2020 living in Japan as an English teacher, and more specifically, I lived in Iwate in the Tohoku region. I can't understand what those numbers really mean, but I've heard my students, my friends, and my neighbors heartbroken as they explain that they lost their students, their neighbors, their friends, and their family. And I'm going to be honest, before I had that experience and I had the chance to meet all of those wonderful people, I didn't really think about the Tohoku triple disaster, not more than any other disaster in history. But since then, it's also something I've become much more aware of and empathetic towards. And that might sound a little bit cold to some people. How could someone not care about people going through a tragedy? But in reality, with the world that we live in now where everything is so connected, I think it's hard to care about every horrific thing that happens worldwide. There's this old saying that's very dark and kinda bleak, but it goes that one death is a tragedy, while 1,000 are a statistic. It basically means that the bigger the scale of the tragedy, the harder it is for us to wrap our heads around it and truly understand and empathize with it. It's part of a set of phenomena called psychic numbing and compassion collapse. Psychic numbing is essentially this idea that we have this type of plateau that caps how much we're able to actually care about something. The difference between how much we care about 1 and 2 people is drastically larger than the difference between how much we care about 156 and 157 people dying. Our brains just aren't meant to deal with emotion on that wide of a scale. This even bleeds into how we act when we're trying to work towards relief. For example, if we see this huge project that's working towards a great goal, we're less likely to donate money because we don't think that our small amount of money could make a significant change. Our brain cannot connect the money that we're spending on such a big cause. However, if it was a more small-scale project, people were more willing to invest more heavily because they thought it would go further. This was actually tested by a social scientist named Paul Slovic, who ran a test on 2 groups of people, each being given the same image of a young girl. In one group, they were given a description of the girl, her name, what was happening with her, and asked people to support. In the other group, they were only told the larger issue at hand. For example, I could say, "This is Caitlin, she is starving. Please donate." While in the other group, I might say, "There are millions of starving children in America, would you please consider donating?" And the test found that not only did the number of donation offers actually decrease, so too did the amount of donations. People were less likely to help on a scale that they felt they would only be a drop in the bucket towards. However, most of the individuals felt that they'd be able to help the starving girl on her own. It's a much more tangible task. And that leads us to the second phenomenon, compassion collapse, which is much more simple. Basically, it's the tipping point. This idea that eventually so many people are affected that it just no longer matters to us in a tangible way. If you've been following the channel for a while, you probably know that I have my degree in history, and as you might expect, there is a lot of reading about death and war when you study history, but to say that I care about the 25 million who died from the plague as much as I care about just Betty White dying this month is just not true. The numbers are too big, the distance in time and location are too substantial, and it just isn't how our emotions are hardwired to function. That 25 million just feels like a number, while Betty White is a person. And that is what I think your name is trying to address. We see the entire world standing still for a moment as they watch this beautiful scene before an entire town gets wiped off the map. And when we jump to the future, We do see a few moments of people remembering Itomori. It appears on the news and in a photograph, but Taki remembers Itomori in a more personal way, at least in pieces. He doesn't know why, but he feels this connection to this place and gets a warm feeling when he looks at its landscapes, even saying what I consider to be one of the most important lines in the movie towards the subtext. During a job interview, Taki explains that you never know when Tokyo might disappear as well, so he wants to build landscapes that leave heartwarming memories. This is kind of a throwaway scene for the most part, but if you read some of the interviews with Makoto Shinkai, you might have a different view on it. At one point, Shinkai expresses that the first sketch drawn for Your Name was Natori City in Miyagi Prefecture, somewhere heavily impacted by the tsunami and left with very few survivors, saying that this could have been my town. A sense of empathy and connection that can only really be drawn when you come face to face with the reality of a situation. He continues on to say that people believe Japanese society would continue on as it had been forever, but since 2011, that idea had changed. A town does not remain a town forever. And while that line could typically be understood in the context of the conversation to mean that Japan, the town in this case, would grow into a big city as it developed and join a more global stage, it could just as easily be interpreted as a town being destroyed or erased as well, especially given the topic of Tohoku's triple disaster or of Your Name. And speaking of which, both of these ideas, the concept of empathy and understanding that any kind of disaster could happen anywhere, and the idea that nothing remains forever, all come together flawlessly in Your Name. While the latter point is represented pretty on the nose with the destruction of Itomori, it's how the tragedy is presented that makes such a strong connection with the viewers. We're supposed to be in Taki's shoes in this story. We learn about a tragedy that we might care for a bit. Some of us might even become obsessed with it. But eventually, we need to move on and continue our lives. However, this story has a bit of a twist. Taki learns about Mitsuha. He learns about the people in her town, and he is literally put in her shoes and understands the feelings and lives of the people who are going through this catastrophic event. And in this way, the 500 people who died are not just a statistic. Your Name works perfectly as a method of going beyond psychic numbing, beyond this idea that the explosion was X kilometers wide, and X number of people died and were injured, and instead allows us to fully understand the fear, the awe, the panic, and the loss that these people go through during a disaster. After all, if there's one thing that a film about characters living each other's lives and swapping bodies might aim to do, it's probably teaching its audience empathy. Thank you so much for watching.